Okay, thank you. And good morning, everyone. My name is Polly Mitchell. I am the co-chair for the SAR Global Council, and welcome to day 2 of our Going Global Experience trade mission. Glad you guys could all be here. Before we begin, of course, there are a few housekeeping items. Today's session is being recorded. To enjoy a better viewing experience, please close any additional browser tabs you may have open. And if you have any if you have any questions for our speakers, please post them in the Q&A, which you can access on your menu bar at the bottom of your screen. Once again, welcome, and let's get started. So thank you to our outstanding marketing partners for this event, the Canadian Real Estate Association, our premier partner, Sharon von Schoenberg. Would you like to take a moment to introduce yourself and say a few words?
Well, good morning, everyone. It's Sharon here, zooming in from Ottawa, Ontario. Glad to be part of the SAR Go Global Week. So I'm looking forward to a great second day. The first day was awesome. And just a reminder, I'm your Canadian connection, connecting realtors here in Canada with your local realtors for cross-border opportunities. So looking forward to today's session. I'm happy I'm here.
All right, thank you, Sharon. Glad you're here too. And next we have Elaine Forget, if hopefully I said that correctly, with the Royal Bank of Canada, RBC Bank. Would you like to introduce yourself and say a few words?
Sure. Thank you, Pauline, and good morning, Arizona, and greetings from Florida. So RBC is very proud to be one of your major sponsors for this virtual global real estate trade mission. And thank you to Scottsdale Global Connect Council for this exciting opportunity for having us. I am, again, Alain Forget, Director of Business Development and Sales for the US for RBC Bank USA. Over 40 years with RBC and the last 20 years in the US. I'm also a real estate license in Florida and a CIPS. So I will in a few minutes, I guess, review with you how RBC Bank can help you and your Canadian clients to grow your business in Arizona. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Elaine. Our topic today will be a panel, a presentation, and a discussion about lending to foreign clients, and in particular, Canadians. Our panel today will represent 3 different areas of concern when listing or selling a home for a global client. Our first guest speaker is Jonah Spiegelman, an attorney with Boughton Law Corporation. He is a cross-border tax and estate planning lawyer. His tax practice is focused on assisting clients with international tax issues, including US-Canada cross-border matters and questions regarding residency and treaty benefits. Licensed to practice law in British Columbia as well as California, Jonah can advise on both sides of the border to suit clients' objectives by creating tax-efficient estate plans and investment structures. As the lead author of the book, Americans in Canada, Smile, the IRS is watching you. That sounds a little scary, but that's okay. Jonah has an in-depth understanding of the tax and estate planning issues facing US citizens who reside in Canada. He also specializes in providing legal services to Canadians who own US real estate, such as transactional representation and structuring title for tax and estate planning efficiency. Jonah, can you give us an overview of some of the legal issues that realtors should be more aware of and educated about when working with clients from across our northern border?
Sure, thanks a lot, Polly. Pleasure to be here this morning. It's a big topic to cover in 10 minutes for sure, but I'll do my best to cover the highlights, and maybe we can finish it up in the Q&A when people have a chance to let it sink in. I want to talk about 2 main topic areas this morning. The first is structuring title. So this would be more on the side that you're helping a Canadian purchase real estate as opposed to listing and selling. Basically, when Canadians come down there, they're on vacation. They want everything to go very smoothly, and that's what you're there to help them for. But it really does benefit the Canadian buyer to give some thought to how they want to structure title before they go in and make that offer. A lot of times it doesn't matter whether they've made the offer before they get advice or after, but especially when it comes to the US estate tax exposure, it's really important to give it some thought early. What I can say from my experience is that most Canadians are simply unaware of the US estate tax exposure that they face when they purchase US real estate, and especially the high net worth Canadians who are looking to pick up properties on the more valuable end. I think that you can assume that if the purchase price is relatively high, that they have some potential exposure to US estate tax. And it's really important for them to evaluate that exposure and structure their title so that those issues don't become problems for them down the road. Because the Canadian and US taxation on death systems are so different, people may assume that they don't have an issue when they really do. And so the numbers can get very large very fast. Fortunately, we have an excellent treaty between the two countries, and there's oftentimes a very generous helping of tax credits available to offset the US estate tax. But it's important to understand that going in, because once you purchase a property in your personal name, it's much more difficult to provide that shelter from the US estate tax exposure. The other title issues that I always talk to clients about have to do with succession of interest. Oftentimes clients I'll ask the client, well, how long do you plan on keeping this property? And they say, well, we want to continue coming down every winter until we can no longer travel. And that starts to make me think, well, let's talk about succession. What happens if someone becomes incapacitated? What happens if one of you or both of you pass away while you own it? Are you aware of the succession plan? And do we have something in place to help your executors really have an easier time with it? My perspective is that vacation properties in particular should be a source of joy, not a source of stress. And so getting the plans in place early on so that you don't have to worry about heading into court in Arizona to manage issues with title, it's always a lot easier to deal with those things on the front end. And oftentimes that'll tie into their larger estate planning, because often the primary estate planning vehicle is a Canadian will for these types of clients, and they need to understand the procedural hurdles that they face to have that be the mechanism for passing title to the executors and ultimately to their beneficiaries. Quite often, trusts can be a much more streamlined mechanism for passing title without having to go into court. Canadian clients don't have the same familiarity with trust planning as all the sort of American communities do. It's just a very different tax environment for trusts. And so the uses for trusts in the States are a lot more broad. And Canadians, if they get the right advice, can piggyback onto that trust planning without going offside in Canada. So it's really important to just sort of get that advice early on, and if they think it's worthwhile, to put something in place. Now, on the selling side of things, I do think that there is something that realtors can add a lot of value for Canadian sellers of US real estate, and that has to do with the withholding under FIRPTA. As I'm sure all of you are aware, on a sale of a piece of real estate by Canadians, we've got a withholding at closing based on the gross sales price. And now this can be, it's obviously not a substantive tax, it's just a withholding, but there can be significant cash flow issues if we don't get out ahead of this withholding regime. Take an example where a property is sold at the end of January in any given year. 15% of the purchase price will go to the IRS, and then a year and a bit later, they're able to file a tax return to actually calculate their tax liability and get the refund. But I can tell you the IRS is not very quick with those refunds. And so if they file a return, it's not really due until the middle of June. That's already 14 months later. And then it'll be another 8 or 9 months before the IRS cuts them a check. That can be a lot of dollars hanging out in limbo for them. And so, it really is helpful for you guys to set the client's expectations around that, and also to encourage them, as soon as they start thinking about selling, to apply for that ITIN, the individual tax ID number for a Canadian person They wouldn't have one if all they did was own a personal use property for however long. But will need one for the withholding regime. And so applying for that ITIN early is something that we can, if we can get that ITIN issued by closing, we have a lot more options in terms of ensuring that that withholding is associated with their personal tax accounts in the US. We can actually get an early refund application in and, get that money back, well over a year earlier. It's a very large benefit. So I would encourage you to, talk to clients who are thinking about selling, about getting that ITIN application in, and understanding that cash flow issue around the FERPTA withholdings.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that's I could speak for 3 hours on this topic, but I think I'll leave it there for the time being.
Okay, thank you. All right, next is Elaine Forget, Director, Head of Sales and U.S. Business Development at RBC Bank. Elaine has been working for RBC for over 40 years, holding various business and sales leadership roles in Canada, the Caribbean, and the U.S. He is passionate about helping Canadians purchase homes in the US and works closely with consumers, real estate professionals, and other strategic partners to provide education and opportunities to Canadian buyers in the US. He acts as a spokesperson for the media and real estate conferences as subject matter expert. He is also a licensed real estate agent in Florida and has a CIPS designation. He holds a degree in finance and management. And Elaine, how do we prepare and what do we really need to be aware of when we are assisting a foreign client with the purchase of a property when they will be looking for financing?
Thank you again, Polly. Good morning, everyone, and glad to be with you this morning. So first, let's just briefly talk about who we are. RBC in Canada is the biggest bank with about 15 million clients, and RBC Bank USA, who I represent, is a national residential lender just for Canadians. So we have what we call the brand recognition and the cultural understanding. This is important to remember that they are coming from a different country. Like Jonah said, they are used to a set of different rules, regs, and even terminology. So it's important for them to get this educated cross-border experience. And for us, we focus also on helping US real estate professionals to grow their business with Canadians. I had a PowerPoint. I don't know if it was possible to get it uploaded because unfortunately I was unable, but just briefly to remind you all that Canadians are still in the top 2 international buyers from NAR International Report last year, 9.5 billion that they have purchased, and Arizona is in the 3 top states. It's actually about 1.4 billion purchased by Canadians last year from April 2019 to March 2020, and representing about 18,300 residential purchase transactions in the US for an average purchase price of $517,000 per average purchase. So it's about 2,600 properties that were bought during that time just in your state. So if we move to the next slide quickly, one of the key factor for Canadians looking to purchase in the US, especially states like Sunbelt state, like Arizona, California, Florida. We know Arizona and Florida are still very affordable for the quality that they can get, also the lifestyle they can get. So for them, the Canadians gonna look at it, gonna be excited to invest in such a beautiful state like Arizona. However, one thing that is against them these days and for the last few years is the currency exchange. It's important to be sensitive to that factor. Right now, Canadian dollar is around 75 cents, which is about 33% premium on their purchase. Look at the last 25 years, only 4 times the Canadian dollar hit par with the US dollar. And you remember those days in 2008, 9, 10, when Canadians were flocking the market and were buying for cash because it was $1 to $1. So it's important to remember that. So if we move to the next slide, we can see just the impact of the currency exchange on the $400,000 purchase. Just just an illustration. If we take the average exchange rate over the last few months, it's about 73 cents. So it's 37% exchange. However, currently, I should say it's a little bit better with 75 cents. But really, that's where we're standing, and our economists are forecasting that it won't change too much around the 75 cents for next year as well. So you see the premium on the exchange of just the Canadian dollar to US. So that $400,000 property represent $548,000 Canadians. So that's a really significant difference of almost $150,000. So this is important as real estate professional to kind of overcome that issue of the weakness of the currency, because everything else, it's compelling. I mean, beautiful lifestyle, beautiful properties, the sun all year long. All of that is good, except when it's time to look at that. So this is why if they get a US mortgage, they can mitigate the impact of the currency exchange. And as a residential lender for Canadians for a second home, we can finance up to 80% in US dollar mortgage. So they don't have to do the exchange for the full amount of the purchase. And by that, at purchase, save like over $115,000 on that purchase. So this is really a key point that you must remember, because right now we're in a currently around the 75 cents, which is significant, of course, premium. So on the next slide, quickly, we just really an overview of our program. We're a residential lender, again, just for Canadians. We can go up to 2.5, 3 million by exception, but most program that we have is up to 2 million. It's for second home, 20% down for Canadians for any product that you can see on that slide. And our term are 3, 5, 7, and 10 years. All our loans are amortized over 30 years, which help to keep the monthly payment low. And like I said, in Canada, they can go up to 25 years, and they usually don't have a 10-year term to offer. So those really, right now, historically low interest rates for us, for Canadians, between 2.75% to 3.5%, historically low. No foreign national premium. Yes, we can refinance. And of course, there's a typical closing cost involved for the state of obviously of Arizona or other states. But it's important to remember that it's a very cost effective for Canadians right now to finance their property when buying in the US. And remember also one thing, in Canada, you cannot repay your mortgage before the end of the term without a prepayment penalty. While in the US, we know all our mortgages are open and they can repay at any time. Let's say they lock for a 7-year term at 3.25%, and then in 4 years, Canadian dollar goes back to par. They can repay the rest of their balance of their US mortgage without any prepayment penalty. So it's important for you to address those points with Canadians, because they don't know what they don't know. And you can just explain to them. This is why, if we move to the next slide, just to wrap up quickly, what we do is we pull the credit story from Canada. So this is how we qualify Canadians. And our staff, of course, of mortgage professionals only work with Canadians, so they understand those cultural or cross-border differences in terms of financing. They can explain it's going to take 30 to 45 days, while it takes 5 to 7 days to get a mortgage in Canada from application to closing. It's important to address those issues. One thing I missed to mention, as a residential lender, we can also finance one investment property, which will require 25% down, and the rate will be about 1% more than what I quoted. So we'll be more 3.75% to 4.5% for an investment property. But a residential second home, they can even rent it as long as they use for at least 6 to 8 weeks during the year. They can rent it on seasonal basis or just a part of the year. So again, we have the best competitive offer for Canadians. And now let's talk about for you how RBC Bank can help you. On the next slide, you're going to see that last year we launched what we call Edge. Edge is basically a microsite or a website of digital tools, resources, content, educational, marketing, everything you need, and you can repurpose to share with your Canadian clients. And this include a lot of education, because again, for Canadians, a lot of differences from a real estate and financing standpoint, as well as what John had just mentioned on the legal, tax, estate issues. So basically, because of time, you can go and visit rbc.com/edge. It's a free resource for real estate professionals that you can find a lot of those tools. And just to have a quick overview of what this is all about, on the next slide, this is how we present it, the tools, the calculators. They can easily apply or get pre-approved actually when they start working with you with just a two-day turnaround time. They apply online. They get a letter for a pre-approval within 2 to 3 days max, and then they can start working with you with that. And the letter is actually good for 120 days. Also, on the right, on the middle of that slide, you see that we have access to cross-border legal and tax advice, a network of professionals like Jonna, who is a part of it, so they can address those legal, tax, estate, cross-border issues that Canadians may have also. And of course, we know your expertise in real estate. However, when you need to answer those questions for Canadians, this is how we can help you to facilitate that. And just to wrap up again, very quick, when they start working with you, they get this link, rbcbank.com/pre-approval. And right now with the border closure since March, of course, this year, Canadians, we do a lot of, they can continue to buy first, but we continue also to facilitate the closing, because we do remote mail away closing, even if they are in Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary, wherever they are, we can facilitate to close on their mortgage remotely. And again, we facilitate all of that. And of course, they can always, you or our clients, access our team of mortgage professionals with the number which is shown there. So basically, all of that is information I wanted to share with you this morning. And I think we're going to have a Q&A session anyway. So back to you, Pauline. Thanks again.
Thank you so much. Really helpful information. Appreciate that. Our next guest speaker is Sheila Long. She is the Regional Sales Executive, is the Regional Sales Executive for Old Republic Exchange in Arizona, Nevada, and Southern California. Sheila has been involved in hundreds of 1031 exchanges, and she is motivated to help in your next transaction. She takes pride in personally spending time with each of her clients to assure they understand the process from start to finish. Sheila is motivated to help in your next 1031 exchange and gives special attention to each transaction until completion. Sheila, is it even possible for a foreign client to either purchase or sell a property involved in a 1031 exchange? How is it different?
Thanks, Polly, and thanks for having me. Hi, everyone. So I wish this was just a simple yes or no answer, but unfortunately it is not. So first off, anyone that has a TIN, so a tax identification number, can do a 1031 exchange. However, when you have a client that is, well, and we'll use Canada since we're using that country. However, here's the thing. You can sell and perform a 1031 exchange, but they would only be able to defer immediately their their US, right? Their state and US tax dollar on this side. However, there's a major issue of double taxation. And a lot of Canadians don't realize that. And they'll go and set it up thinking that they can have this 1031 exchange and they won't be subject to gains immediately in Canada. So one of the biggest things I always say, and it's sort of like one of those, I don't want to say it's a no-no, but it does take, and I love how Elaine said there's this cross-border legal tax advice, because that's the number one thing I say whenever I have a Canadian resident ask to do a 1031 exchange, or I find out and I see that their residence is not here over on this side of the border. I immediately let them know, before you perform this exchange, you need to make sure that not only are you speaking to a US CPA, but talk to a Canadian tax advisor or an attorney. And most times they figure they haven't set it up correctly and they realize this double taxation. That means that they're going to be taxed right when they sell. Okay. And that's going to be due during the time after that 1031 exchange occurs. And then again, when they sell again in a 1031 exchange, they're not going to be able to get away from it like a US residents can, where they can defer, and swap till they drop. Thank you, Polly.
Well, thank you. Okay, perfect. Okay. Okay, now we are now opening up for the question and answers or Q&A for any questions for today. Like I said before, please use the Q&A button down below on your screen. And then while we're waiting, I have a couple of questions. Well, actually, Suzanne probably wrote these, but I have a couple of questions.
Polly, it's Suzanne. We do have a question in the Q&A already.
All right.
The question, I believe this is for Elaine. What is foreign national premium?
Okay, good question. And thank you, Suzanne, for that. It's actually a lot of lenders in the US, when they work with a non or a foreign national, a non-US person or resident or citizen, they will charge a premium on the rate. So they will charge a 1.5%, even sometimes 2% over the rate, while we treat our Canadians not like foreign national because we qualify them from the asset, income, credit history, and all that from Canada. So we treat them like we will consider Americans. So this is the difference why our rates are so competitive.
Thank you for that, Elaine. Polly, I'll turn it back over to you while we wait for more questions in the Q&A, and I'll let you go ahead.
If Elaine wants to answer another question, since he did that one, we have one for you. What are some of the market dynamics we can watch out for which tend to trigger a significant shift in lending rates? And are those triggers the same for both the Canadian and American markets?
Okay, that's a question that in just a very short answer. I will say, first of all, unfortunately, we all know about the pandemic all over the world, but what Canada economy and the US economy are considered, major, of course, economies. So we feel like still for both countries, the current interest rate will remain under pressure, will remain low for the, of course, central banks in Canada and the US, the Fed, because it's important also to, as a part of the recovery, the economic recovery, that those interest rates remain low. So what is important to understand is in the next, I will say probably a year or two, throughout this process, we will be subject to low interest rates. However, on the currency exchange, this is another key factor for Canadians looking to purchase US real estate. It is really something that unfortunately, we don't expect to see Canadian dollar bouncing back at 90, 95, even at par with the US dollar in the short term. So those are two key considerations. And of course, post-COVID, hopefully sooner than later, we will see Canadians coming back. A lot of them are on the sideline right now, just waiting to come down here, especially the winter is coming. And we know that up north, and they will start to come look. So hopefully the border will reopen soon too.
Hopefully. Okay.
Yeah. I hope this answered the question.
Yeah, I know. Okay, and Jonah, we have a question for you. In your experience in working with American-Canadian cross-border transactions, which country tends to pose the most legal hurdles for completing a transaction?
As between Canada and the US, you mean?
Yes.
Well, certainly the mortgage process in the US tends to be a lot more paper heavy than the Canadian mortgaging process. There's just, I couldn't say why that's the case. It must have to do with just the regulations in effect. But I know that my Canadian clients are always very surprised at the amount of paper that they need to have pass over their desk in order to complete a mortgage on the US side. Quite often it's very, very quick and simple in Canada, whereas I know that the paperwork is pretty heavy on the US side. Definitely it's helpful when like my clients who've gone through RBC financing, because they're speaking the same language, if you will, that it gets a little bit simpler, but there's still a lot of paperwork that goes into it. So on that side of things, definitely Canada's a bit more streamlined. On the flip side, though, in British Columbia, at least where I live, in any real estate transaction, you need two lawyers involved. You cannot complete a real estate transaction in BC without buyer having a lawyer and seller having a lawyer. And my Canadian clients who are coming down with that expectation often get quite confused when they hear that no one needs a lawyer at all to complete a real estate transaction because of the escrow process and the title companies who take care of all of the things that buyer and seller lawyers tend to do. So, my clients in Canada definitely have the expectation that they need a lawyer, and then they're a little bit bewildered when they're told they don't. So I'm often asked to come in and sort of be their buyer's lawyer and help them with that, even though what they really need is a translation of US language to Canadian understanding. So, it goes both ways, I would say.
Yeah, that's super helpful. Knowledge is power in that way. More people know, the better it will go. Okay, Sheila, we have a question for you. What are some examples of transactions you have handled which deal with an international client component?
Okay, so I've done transactions all the way from Guam to New York, so I'm all over. One of the things that I think that a lot of taxpayers don't realize is that when you're doing a 1031 exchange, it's domestic, right? On the US side, you can do it in any state and US territory with the exception of Puerto Rico. So I've had someone go from Guam selling a hotel and then went over to California and bought multiple properties on this mainland side. Also, a lot of clients ask, well, can I take this US 1031 exchange and buy in Canada? And so one of the things, or can I take it and buy it overseas in say somewhere in Europe? And one of the 1031 exchange rules are you have to do it here domestically, or you can do it on foreign ground. And that would be, say, maybe you sold in France and then bought in Spain. And so one of the things I do notice is that I get that question often on what can I do with my exchange proceeds? Are there ways to take it over the border? And unfortunately, there's not. So that is one of the most common questions that occur and happen.
That's a good one. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Suzanne, any other questions, or we zoomed through this literally quickly?
You did. They're pretty quick on those questions.
Yeah.
I don't see any questions that have come through from our audience yet. Please be sure to go ahead and ask them. I think I do have another question kind of for everybody if you want to go around and ask it as far as it impacts their industry, is basically what's new with any of the changes that have gone on since we've entered this pandemic. We've got, I know a lot of our areas have gone into the doing all of our transactions online, remotely. What have been some of the aspects that have been impacting transactions, at least as far as your sector, that you're having to accommodate or make changes for, which you didn't have to do before? Or is it the same, we're just cruising on and nothing's changed? So if we want to...
Well, I can speak to that one, Suzanne, if you want.
Go for it.
Yeah, it's an interest. Obviously, the volume of purchases, I would estimate, not that I have actual data on it, I would expect that the purchases are down because Canadians simply can't go very easily down and pick up properties. But on the specific of the COVID shutdown, I've seen something. It's less a problem for Arizona, but certainly for California and Hawaii. When a property is sold, the deed to transfer title in those two states requires a U.S. notary public, and to sort of witness that deed in order to make it recordable in the county offices. And sellers who are trapped in Canada for all intents and purposes, it's been a very challenging thing to be able to give them access to a U.S. notary public to close that deal. The U.S. consulate in Canada has been closed. Its notarial offices are not, it's not taking notarial appointments. And it's simply not practical for the the clients to get down into the U.S. to have that deed witnessed. And so it's been quite a challenge, actually, over the last 6 months. I've had a number of calls from people like, what do I do about this? And it's, there is a process where a Canadian notary can get their seal authenticated through, government departments in order to make it recordable in these different, in California and Hawaii. But it's very challenging and it delays a lot of things. And so I expect that some of the participants who, are helping Canadians sell properties have experienced that. Again, not so much in Arizona, where a Canadian notary seal is acceptable for recording, but it's been a challenge for a lot of my clients who are trying to sell their property, either because they don't see the U.S. as, if they're locked out, why they have a property there, for one thing, I suppose, but also, in some ways it's a good time to buy because the market is a little topsy-turvy, and it could be an excellent opportunity, but they're unable to close their sale because of this really strange procedural problem. I don't know really why California and Hawaii don't trust our notaries to execute those deeds, but they don't. So there you go.
Interesting. Yeah.
California, right?
Yeah.
Always.
Anybody else? Elaine, do you have a take on any changes that have been
Yes,
having to deal with?
Yeah, quite similar to Jonah, what you just mentioned. Of course, California and Hawaii have been always challenging states from that remote standpoint across the border. However, I should say that RBC Bank, we are U.S. direct and cross-border bank, and we're virtual. So for us, we kind of use already to work remotely. Somebody from Vancouver can apply for mortgage to buy a property in Arizona, and for us, it didn't change. However, I should say, even if we have less Canadians purchasing U.S. properties in the last 8 months, we have seen the ones that are buying, we have seen obviously more remote, virtual, cross-border mail-away closing, which we facilitate already, which is make it convenient. And the trend we've seen a lot too is the Canadians to take out U.S. home equity. Because of the currency exchange went down, because of the low interest rate, Canadians who bought 6, 7, 8 years ago at par, and even 10 years ago in the crisis, and then the increased value of their property, low interest rate, and now when they bought, there was a dollar for dollar, and now, of course, the dollar is at 75 cents. So it's a huge premium on the currency, and second, on the appreciation of the increased value of their property. So a lot of them took out some equity out. So the team has been very busy doing refinancing and U.S. home equity. And it's a good time to do that too, because again, they can leverage a little bit on the property that appreciated, take that money, buy another property also if they want, like an investment property. So just to keep in mind that each challenges or situation, in, of course, in this economy and financial world that has been unprecedented in the last 8 months, created some other ways to do or to look at how we can facilitate those for real estate professionals as well as Canadian clients.
Thanks, Elaine. Sheila, do you have a take? Any changes?
I'm getting asked a lot. There's a couple things I just want to point out real quick. Just like Jonah had said, watch out for FIRPTA. File your certificates early. Or plan on, if you're going to do the 1031 exchange, plan on bringing in that potential 15% because it is taking a while for the IRS to release those funds. I'm getting a lot of questions on what's going to happen with the new administration and is the 1031 going to go away? So it seems like everyone on the US side is trying to, as quick as they can, do an exchange in fear that it's going to go away. And so I thought I would just point this out because I do get that question often. As this is the case with every potential administration, the party seeking election historically uses this 1031 as a potential source of revenue to support their programs. And so we're putting this out here so that everyone's aware that as of right now, even though it's on the chopping block, the 1031 exchange, it's been proven that there's significant negative impact on our economy. And so at this position, even though it's there and everyone's asking, there's far too many unknowns to be creating any panic. So what I'm saying is that as of now, it's not a huge concern for us. I do want everyone else to be aware of as well, when you are on this side of the border, if you are selling and trying to buy in Arizona, that's another common thing I'm seeing happen, where they're trying to sell like out of California and buy here. And some of the state specific laws apply that a lot of clients don't think they think they can get away from certain tax like California. And California has a wonderful clawback rule that they require anyone that exchanges out of their state, if they are, foreign national or they are a U.S. citizen, that they fill out a required form annually, letting that state know. And that's like one of 5 states that actually does this. So I think a lot of these transactions that are happening so quickly over this crazy year, I can't say it enough to make sure you're getting legal representation, speaking with your CPAs and your attorneys, because so much is changing around us, and just be aware of that. So if you're going to exchange or not, and if you're foreign or, again, US resident.
Thank you, Sheila. Great information. We did have some people pop up and ask if we can have all of your contact information. So for you, Sheila, and Elaine and Jonah, if you can put that into the chat box so that they can get a hold of you, they would love to have that information, be able to I think they might want to send some business your way.
Thank you.
But I did have, I have like my own question. I have another question that popped up. The question is, would you be able to share information on the frequency of Americans buying in Canada? I know we talked a lot about what's kind of been going on in Arizona, and we're seeing a lot of stuff going on with the interest rates and the currency exchange. But what about the reverse? Is that happening? Is that transpiring? Do any of you have a take on that?
Susan, if I may, I just can share a few thoughts, because later this week, I think we have a beautiful panel of speakers on Friday with Shannon from Korea. And I think that will cover actually some of those requests of information, because yes, Americans are buying in Canada. And actually, I don't want to steal, but I know Shannon has a lot of great information to share with the attendees on this panel Friday, or maybe even earlier on another panel. But I know Friday will be part of the topic.
Perfect. Which is a nice segue. If you know of anybody that hasn't signed up for the trade mission and they want that information, it's a great day you can still register and attend all the rest of our days and events going on the rest of the trade mission this week. Thanks, Elaine. And I see that you guys are going to start posting your contact information in the chat for everybody. If not, I think I can get one of my counterparts over there, Corinne, our admin, to help out with that as well. The next question I had, it kind of goes back to the question I had asked previously, is regarding what are some of the challenges and changes you've seen because of COVID, and hearing you're talking about a lot of it's coming down to being able to do things remotely, and it's what the capabilities are. I know in Arizona, it's with us being able to do the remote notary authorization. We've been able to do things with appraisals, desktop appraisals, to help facilitate some of those transactions. We're definitely a lot more fortunate than some of our neighboring states that do not have those systems in place and processes that are allowing us to do that. But what about on, say, the Canadian side, or other countries? Are you seeing, are they relying on the processes to be streamlined in the US, or are there some changes that are going on in like Canada as well? Or is this a governance process that can be cumbersome, that is there any timeline in the future that maybe we can see things be accelerated so that you can and deal with transactions, especially as we're seeing some reclosures of communities and countries. They're having to back off the reopening because of resurgence. Everybody wants to get back to business as usual, but what are you seeing? What is there? Do you have any insights on that? Maybe Jonah, maybe you have some.
Well, there's been a number of measures put into place to help manage the reality of physical distancing and sort of for example, since the spring when the lockdown sort of in British Columbia started, the government created some new rules that around virtual witnessing of things like wills and powers of attorney. So for the last 6 months, we've been able to do a will signing, for example, over a video call, which was not at all possible before that. So there's some moves in that direction. I still find it's a little bit hard to change practice. And I've done some virtual signings of documents, but it's difficult to know sort of from this moment in time how those documents will be viewed right now, or like down the road when it's time to probate a will and it's clear that the witnesses weren't there. Are we going to have to lead evidence on the ministerial order that authorized us to do this? It's a weird time because certain parts of our practice have been the same for decades really, and we're trying to come up with new ways of doing things, and I think everyone's sort of feeling their way together, and it's hard to know. I think that ultimately if everything goes back to normal, people like to come and sit down and talk in a room with a real human and not just on the Zoom calls, as nice as they are. And, certainly we don't miss the commute that much, but, I think that our habits will probably settle back into something, if not exactly like the before time, then, we'll find a new balance.
Thank you, Jonah. Elaine, do you have something along those of what you're seeing? Any governance hiccups or what's going on the flip side?
Yeah, actually, for me, I'm more kind of on the US side, but what I can understand from our Canadians, partners, RBC and or clients, is the fact that a lot of them now, like all of us on their some heavy uncertainty. So just from the compliance and all that, for us, I mean, the process is still the same. They can apply, they can get a pre-approval, they can get, however, like Jonah mentioned earlier, the process will remain the process. It takes 5 days to get a mortgage in Canada to close and make it easy. In the US, I mean, we have to work with the regulatory requirements and all that. And it's some more 30, 45 days with more documentation and all that. So this is why it's important that for you to know that, again, our team of mortgage professionals only working with Canadians, so they can kind of manage their expectations or educate them. As an example, talking about education, over the last 7-8 months, we've done a lot of education to our clients. And this is something I would like to share with you all, because that shows our Canadians are still looking to buy US real estate, or the ones who own may be looking to sell real estate because of what's going on. So this is all good for you all in Arizona, knowing that you're always been in the top 3 states where Canadian destination for Canadians over the last 10 years. So one thing that the Canadians are contemplating right now, a lot of them say, I'm going or not this winter. Of course, they want to come down in beautiful Arizona this winter and escape the brutal Canadian winter. However, until things are more settled in terms of the border and health with the COVID, they are on standby. Others are looking to maybe sell their property that they bought, 4, 5, 6 years ago, and just cash out, say, okay, well, we'll let all that settle. Others are looking to refinance to cover their cost. If they don't come, at least they don't have to exchange Canadian dollar to US. So home equity line of credit refinancing on those properties is another cost-effective way to cover those expenses, property taxes and all that. Others are looking to try to rent their property because they know they will not be coming in January, February, March this year. So they may want to generate US income, rental income, to cover again their costs. Others, they say, okay, we're going, but whenever the border reopen, we will go and we will do whatever it has to be done in terms of social distancing, mask, and everything else we know. So this is really where a lot of them right now. And the thing that I've seen is over the last 2 months, we did a virtual series of advice events on buying or owning US real estate with internal and external experts, including economists and real estate, legal tax expert like Jonah. We had 1,700 of our clients who signed up for those. So they're looking for being educated. Even if it's virtually, they love to get, and like we said, knowledge is power. And for them, they have a lot of uncertainty in their world right now. And this is the kind of ways for us to keep them engaged, to be resourceful for real estate professionals, for their clients. And when things get back to a more normal life, not just in the US and Canada, but worldwide with COVID, it's going to come back. We just don't know how long it's going to take, but it will come back because a lot of those Canadians, they don't want to stay in Canada during the winter.
Yes. Thank you, Elaine. Sheila, kind of same question to you. Is there any kind of governance hangups or things that you're seeing that it would be nice if they would streamline some of that stuff? Are you seeing any of that in your side of the transactions?
Well, I've got a sort of a question for Jonah, and Elaine and I have talked about this before, but I know you guys have a tax code. I think it's section 44 that protects some of these Canadians from their tax, but it doesn't come into effect with the 1031 exchange. How do you handle that? Like for me, I always tell everyone to make sure that they're setting up their corporations here on the US side, but I really can't give that advice on that since I don't do a whole lot of Canadian transactions. So my question, I would actually direct what you're asking for me, Suzanne, to Jonah. How can I help streamline a 1031 exchange for a foreign resident coming from over the border?
Yeah, I am not aware of a way to make a 1031 exchange work for a Canadian resident. Canadian income tax rules are really, they're based a lot on capital gains and keeping current with capital gains. So we pay capital gains on any disposition, except for a very few qualifying rollover provisions. So if you make a gift, if you die, if you sell, those are all capital gains tax events. If you depart Canada for income tax purposes, this is capital gains tax event. So we don't have a lot of these other types of taxes like the estate tax or that sort of thing. So our system is really geared towards keeping current with your capital gains. Even a trust, an irrevocable trust, has a deemed disposition event every 21 years to make sure that those gains are taxed within a reasonable period of time. So if there is a way to make a 1031 exchange work for a Canadian resident, I'm all ears, but I do not know of one.
Yeah, see, that's sort of what I'm running into, or I mentioned that double taxation, right?
Yeah.
They can, on this side of the border, defer their US gain, but then they're still stuck paying it on your side. And then again, when they sell, even if they exchange again. So it's not always a benefit, unfortunately, to do that. So those are one of the issues I'm running into.
Yeah, and even where you have property held in a U.S. corporation, for example, where you might think that you could sort of segregate the Canadian-U.S. tax impacts of a given transaction, a foreign corporation from a Canadian perspective, so a U.S. corp, if it sells a property, we have these accrual rules, kind of like the controlled foreign corporation rules, where unless you pass that gain back up to Canada, you're going to get taxed on it anyway in many cases. So it's very difficult to get a 1031 to work for a Canadian resident, unfortunately.
Thank you. Thank you, Sheila and Jonah. So here's one more question I have for all of you. As we've seen going through and into the pandemic, changes with contracts, there's been some new things that we've had to deal with as far as the real estate transaction process. And I wanted to see if any of you are having to incorporate some of these new things when it comes to disclosures or new kind of insurance protections on the different parts of the transactions. Are you seeing any of these additional ones that maybe are more specific for international transactions because of the new nuances with COVID? Any of you seen any of that?
I can answer. I'm not seeing any of that on my side. So it's nothing has changed on that for us. So
just business as usual.
Almost, exactly. And I will say from a financing standpoint, we've seen, Susan, the more remote closing because people cannot cross the border on the ground border, or they don't want just to fly, because if they go back to Canada after the closing, they have to stay 14 days in quarantine. So, we're very respectful of that, but that's why we try to facilitate everything with the real estate professional involved, with the clients and everyone involved in the parties, to coordinate all that in a remote, mail away, virtual way, and make it easy as possible. Like Jonah said about California and Hawaii, we know it's very challenging, those states. We've been able to do close deals with somebody in Alberta for the property in South California for a refinancing. It was challenging, I will say. So we tried different ways, but it was compliant. It was fully done with the title company and escrow, but it was challenging though. And those are kind of things we push the boundaries. We try to find not work around in terms of not being respectful, of course, of the ground rules of the regulators and all that. However, creative, I will say, and make it happen for everyone. And it worked. So I think that's the way we have to have this mindset right now, is to be creative and to try everything we can do to make it happen.
Thank you, Elaine. It's weird. So what I see is that it's really just keeping the transaction, the whole process as smooth as possible. There really isn't anything new to the process. No changes that we have to be aware of along those lines, which is great to hear. That we just got to keep pushing forward.
Exactly.
I'm not seeing any further questions from our audience as far as anything they have. So maybe we've covered all their bases. But just to give you one more opportunity, is there any other thing that we haven't covered yet when it comes to doing international transactions, what's going on, current or maybe future projections, anything that you want to share with us? We left off with you, Elaine. Do you want to take up that question, and then we'll kind of touch back with Jonah and Sheila?
Sure, Susan. I will just say again, we want to be resourceful for you, and especially when you work with, of course, global clients like Canadians. I think the most important piece of advice is to have, of course, the E-team, the resourceful team around you, to address those legal, tax, financing issues or questions, because Canadians will ask those questions. So you want to make sure, as a real estate professional, you focus on making the deal happen to find their dream home under the sun of Arizona. And again, to get the question, don't be distracted by that. Just have your network around you that understand Canadians, work with Canadians like Jonah and myself and our team to make it happen for you, and just leverage those resources around you. So stay safe, and thanks again for the opportunity this morning, Susan.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Elaine. Jonah?
Yeah, I think I would echo Elaine's comment there. There's a lot to keep track of. Things are changing, governments change, tax laws change, regulation and procedures change. And it's just important to stay in contact, like Elaine said, with the team of people who understand and are, it's our job. It's my job to keep track of certain changes. I don't know every change. I know what I know. And so you got to build a team that's going to be able to, quickly answer the questions that arise. And so this type of event, I think, is fantastic, just to keep everyone, aware of the changes. These are very strange times, and we're all trying to find our way through, and we'll get there. We'll get there if we keep pushing.
Thank you, Jonah. Sheila?
Yeah, I just want to add, and obviously say I'm going to third that, but it's so important, right, to have your legal advice and knowing and understanding. And I also think it's important for anyone here that is going to be buying, if they're coming from Canada, get a real estate agent, have a realtor that knows. And there are some really great ones that I can refer to they're knowledgeable. So if you're going to have an agent and you're buying on this side, since you don't have an attorney representing you here in Arizona, make sure your agent is familiar and potentially from Canada, because they know and they work close with these other two that are on this panel with me, that understand sort of the specifics, that if you just hire someone that was born and raised here in Arizona to help you sell and buy a property, they're not familiar with some of these rules. So I also want to say, if they are going to perform a 1031 exchange, because I have some Canadians fight me and say, well, I am sheltering at least my US gain, do understand that the 1031 exchange industry is not regulated. And what that means is anyone can act as a qualified intermediary. So it's so important they go with a nationwide company that has that bonding, that fraud protection, and really protects their assets and gives them that letter of indemnity. So important to keep in contact and aware of obviously laws on both sides of the border. That's it.
Thank you, Sheila. Well, do any of our audience, any last chance for questions? I'm not seeing anybody jump up there, and
I have one last question.
You have one last question? Go for it, Laura.
For our speakers, and I think Jonah started this early on, and the comments you guys just made were very important for people to remember in the transactional process. But we keep talking about the fact that the agents should be aware, cautious, concerned, and educated. So my question is about resources. So perhaps more for you, Jonah, and for Elaine, how does someone find those resources if they don't know that you exist? So if you have someone who gets a referral for a Canadian client from some source, whether it's corporate relocation or a referral from their cousin, whatever the case may be, how do they begin? Is there information available for them somewhere that a broker or a knowledgeable person that's helping them can push them toward?
Well, I mean, I think it's events like this that are hopefully giving realtors out there, tips on where to seek the information. I mean, there's really no substitute for asking an actual set of questions and getting the advice, specific to the facts. There's no such thing as a cookie cutter solution that works for every single person. Everyone's circumstances are different. And so I would really encourage, folks to, attend sessions like this, understand, get a highlight of the issues that need to be flagged, and then refer people out to qualified professionals who can provide the advice that is specific to a given person. I talk about the same issues over and over and over again with different clients, but the advice is not the same, right? I mean, everyone's situation is different. You need to find a solution that works for a given person in their given circumstance. So I don't think there's any real substitute for getting the advice direct from someone who's competent to give it. But sessions like this, and there's a ton of writing out on the internet that raise issues. The issues are common. The solutions are different. And I think that's what I would say.
That's a good one.
Yep. And I echo what Jonah just said. Great question, Laura, because it's truly with such global educational and leadership that this event this week is all about, is educating. And you don't need to be an expert in everything. Your focus is on real estate, knowing your clients, knowing the market, knowing and connect them with their dream home in Arizona. I will say that education and awareness, our biggest challenge is to make them real estate professional aware of the resources, the solution, and the educational content we developed over the years. And I will tell you, 5-6 years ago, this is why I did my real estate license in Florida, because I was doing those events, but I wanted to better connect with the day-to-day challenges and opportunities of real estate professionals like you all. And this has helped me. And 2 years ago, I said to our digital marketing director, I said, I need all those resources and tools and solutions and educational nuggets to be in a digital way of having a digital platform for them. And this is what in my presentation we call EDGE, is to give you some edge, some tools, resources, and everything that you really need to understand from that standpoint, working with Canadians. And sometimes I got a call from a real estate professional and say, Alain, I have a Canadian clients. And I said, that's great. Okay, how can I help you and how we can help you to make this happen? And I think, like Jonah said, it's just to be part of the core team when you know about Canadians, to refer to those, of course, specialists and experts. And I will say that EDGE content, a lot of those things in a digital format. You can repurpose, copy, paste, add that to a newsletter, add that. And remember, RBC brand is recognized in Canada by all Canadians as #2 most recognized brand after McDonald's, and for over 150 years. So this is why they will feel the trust. They will feel like, oh, RBC can help on financing too in the US. I didn't know. And that's a win-win situation. This is really how we want to be, is resourceful for you guys, for real estate professional and your clients, to make it happen. This is really true education, true awareness. And again, thanks again for the opportunity this morning.
Nice.
Thank you, Elaine. Is that all the questions you had, Laura?
That will do for me today.
That'll do for you today. Well, we're getting messages in here that everybody loves the panel. Thank all of you so much for answering all our questions. I think you've blown our minds today, just processing all those tools and resources and information. I'm going to turn it back over to our SAR Global Council co-chair, Polly Mitchell. Polly, do you want to pick back up?
Yes. I will close out. Thank you again. That was actually really wonderful information. Appreciate it. So tomorrow, starting at 8:30, is day 3 of our global experience. And our guest speakers will be Stephanie Pressler from Experience Scottsdale. And hopefully I don't annihilate these names, but here I go. Jose Ituri, is that correct? Ituri? From the Valley Hotel, and Ronan Averom from the Saguaro Hotel, along with Rob Miller, the Economic Development Director from Scottsdale. So that's a great lineup as well. We will learn about the impact of COVID on our local tourism, the hotel industry, and investment in Scottsdale. So join us tomorrow to hear the predictions for the future. Woohoo!